Comrade Thulas Ngesi. On the extreme left is a member of our Central Committee and PB, Comrade Jenny Schreiner. Just next to me is a member of our Central Committee, Comrade Inyi Kontini. Some of you may know him as the National Secretary of the Young Communist League, the position that he vacated in December last year. Without wasting any further time, I will hand over to the General Secretary to take you through the statement. Comrade GS.
Yeah, thank you very much, Comrade, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Fourth Estate and our officials. Just to indicate apologies for some of our officials who had thought we would do this press conference yesterday, but when we changed the time to today, it affected a number of them due to prior commitments, including our Deputy National Chair just coming from hosting the DG of ILO, which is an important assignment in his work. But we are glad that he has joined us, and other members of our Central Committee have joined us. Treasurer. Our augmented Central Committee statement reads as follows. The SACP held its annual augmented Central Committee meeting over the weekend of 31st March to 2nd April in Braamfontein, Johannesburg. The meeting included expanded representation from SACP provinces and districts, as well as from the Young Communist League. The Augmented Central Committee was convened to finalize the outstanding task of the Central Committee given by the resolution from the 15th National Congress on state and popular power and electoral considerations. The meeting was preceded by intensive and robust discussions by the provincial and district structures of the SACP over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Assessment of the developments in the country and the world was presented by the General Secretary, followed by a CC discussion paper titled State, Popular and Electoral Consideration, Contesting Elections More Effectively with or Without a Reconfigured Alliance. The Augmented Central Committee welcomed and accepted the general thrust of the Augmented Central Committee internal discussion document. The ACC agreed to contest elections with an effective and reconfigured alliance as our preferred modality, as our posture towards the 2024 elections and beyond. By reconfiguration, we mean a common alliance commitment to defend and advance the national democratic revolution based on the vision of the Freedom Charter. In addition, we will engage alliance partners for a consensus around the following: a common analysis of the socio-economic conditions facing the working class and the poor, followed by a common socio-economic approach program, manifesto development and its joint implementation by an adequately inclusive alliance leadership in Parliament, in provincial legislatures, in Cabinet, provincial executive councils, municipal councils, and mayoral committees. Conduct of alliance candidates based on common alliance discipline during the campaign, as well as alliance public representatives and office bearers afterward. Provisions enabling elected SACP representatives to articulate independent perspectives in Parliament, provincial legislatures, and municipal councils within the framework of a reconfigured alliance. Accountability of elected alliance representatives as well as of SACP members to the party, just as ANC members are expected to be accountable to the ANC and our people. A common approach and binding democratic consensus-seeking consultations to coalitions when it becomes necessary to seek coalition partners post-elections on the results of the elections. This is the position of the SACP as we approach the 2024 elections or any by-election. The meeting also agreed that should a satisfactory reconfigured alliance not materialize, the SACP will move towards a popular left front as an electoral modality. Furthermore, on a case-by-case basis, the lower structures of the party will make the motivations for the party to stand independently for the by-elections. Building a left popular front remains essential, even for purposes not related to contesting elections, for building a powerful socialist movement of workers and poor on the ground and defending and ensuring that our national democratic revolution takes the socialist direction. In the next few weeks and months, our position on contesting elections will be the focus of our engagements within the alliance, with the ANC and COSATU, and by extension to mass organizations of youth, women, civic and religious organizations, and so on. We'll also engage our communities and the broader organized workers. On the persistent crisis of capitalism in our country, the Augmented Central Committee convened in the context of a deepening crisis of the capitalist system in the country and the world on many fronts. The objective crises of capitalism in our country have been made possible by the neoliberal restructuring of the economy, failure to discipline capital by government, and privatization and corporatization of state-owned enterprises. We have seen the rising cost of living crisis hitting hard on the workers and the poor. The recent increases of the electricity tariffs by NESA and the repo rate by the South African Reserve Bank, leading to interest rates hike, have further increased the cost of living of the working class. The Augmented Central Committee was deeply concerned about the South African Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee's decision to increase the repo rate once more by 50 basis points in response to rising inflation levels. While the significance of price stability as derived from the SACP mandate is in no dispute, it is equally important to note that the mandate also dictates that price stability should be maintained in the interest of balanced and sustainable economic growth. Therefore, this decision, which comes at the back of economic growth decline in the fourth quarter of 2022 as reported by StatSA, and rising unemployment, can hardly be considered balanced nor sustainable, and in no uncertain terms underscore the SAP's narrow focus on inflation in total disregard of the need to consider economic growth and employment in its monetary policy decisions. These punitive decisions against the working class and the poor particularly is unlikely to resolve inflation in South Africa, as the underlying cause of inflation is not demand-driven and is even induced by conditions beyond our control, like the war in Ukraine. By the SAP's own admission, the current inflation in South Africa is of a supply-side nature, that is so-called cost-push inflation. The current rise in prices is fundamentally caused by the crisis of capitalist profitability. The immediate cause includes, amongst others, rising oil prices, supply-side constraints, load shedding, potential non-competitive behavior in food supply chains and other industries, exchange rate depreciation, and other supply-side effects rooted in capitalist falling profitability. Notwithstanding the fact that since the SAP hiking cycle started towards the end of 2021, the repo rate increased 9 times by a cumulative 425 basis points. Inflation, however, remained around the 7% level, averaging around 6.9% in 2022, with the latest increase of 7.0% in February 2023. This may indicate the ineffectiveness of monetary policy to deal with the supply side or cost-push inflation. On the demand side, raising interest rates is a blow to the already constrained working class, middle class, as well as lower level middle class, and different sections of the businesses, especially SMMEs. This no doubt will further depress the already low consumer spending and thus negatively impact aggregate demand. On the supply side, rising interest rates increase the cost of production as producers faced higher borrowing costs. The decision, therefore, to raise policy rates under the current circumstances is likely to make inflation worse while further depressing economic growth. This is a recipe for economic phenomenon called stagflation. Thus, for all intents and purposes, the monetary policy path that the SAP is pursuing will indeed most likely reduce inflation by engineering a depression, and this will have a devastating impact on the country's economy. As South Africans, we must urgently have an open, inclusive discussions about the mandate of the SAP. We need to categorically determine and reach a mutual understanding of what the role of South African Reserve Bank regarding economic growth and thus employment is. When all things are considered, however, it must be recognized that there are many other factors affecting and driving inflation that are beyond the practical control of any central bank. Addressing these factors will reduce the need to use one blunt instrument, in this case the repo rate, to deal with inflation. On monetary and fiscal policy broadly, this crisis cannot be solved now and again by an austere fiscal policy. Neither this crisis can be resolved by a monetary policy that narrowly targets inflation at the expense of balanced economic growth. This will require macroeconomic policies that contribute towards economic growth, the transformation of economic ownership and industrial structure through industrialization, which also takes advantage of green industrialization to contribute towards a low carbon economy. Dealing with the current situation will require the government to decisively address our inadequate rail infrastructure, aging road networks, and congestions on our roads, which all tends to increase the cost of living and production and thus negatively impact inflation development. On the immediate challenges of load shedding and the energy crisis, the SACP welcomes the introduction of the National State of Disaster in electricity, which is already showing positive signs of reducing and eventually ending load shedding. We also welcome the exemption of critical infrastructure such as hospitals and water facilities from load shedding. While the Minister of Electricity must be supported in his responsibilities to deal with the electricity crisis, the SACP reiterates its stance that this crisis must not be used as a ploy to privatize Eskom, which can only make access to electricity unfavorable and unaffordable to most South Africans. On the contrary, the SACP argues for building Eskom as a publicly owned enterprise as part of the general program to support industrialization, energy security, and a just energy transition, thereby contributing to energy security, job creation, and structural transformation of the economy. The SACP also calls for a strengthened capacity of the democratic state to respond to and address flood and other disasters. We are quite concerned with the state's inability to respond effectively to disasters that affect the lives and livelihoods of our people through their direct and indirect impact in places such as KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and Northwest. The case of the recent of the collapse of the mining slime dam in Jacques-Fontein in the Free State in September 2022, which emanating from this, livelihoods of communities, namely hundreds of houses that were destroyed, together with most and in some instances all people's belongings, life lost and one still missing, livestock lost, all affected by this disaster. To this day, nearly 7 months after the disaster, there has been very little progress despite the declaration of a state of emergency, which should have given powers to state authority enabled by the Disaster Act to make appropriate interventions. The SACP further notes with grave concern the arrogance of the mining bosses, who refuse to offer appropriate and fair compensation to communities affected, and calls on the government to step up its role to address the disparate situation facing these affected communities. On the new wars of imperialism, the SACP, along with communists the world over, has always called for an end to all wars and for peace in the world. Capitalism, on the one hand, is fueled by profit logic. It does not want peace, yet it has proven to be more profitable during wars, particularly the industrial military complex that continues to stop wars. Workers, the poor, and the vulnerable suffer the most in any war. Recently, US-led Western imperialism has become even more arrogant, more aggressive, and greedy. This is leading to more conflicts around the world. Imperialists claim to support freedom and democracy, but they are constantly breaking international law and applying it selectively. They isolate and impose sanctions on those who resist their attempts to control the world, and even grossly impose their ideas as universal ideas and values of the entire world. But increasingly, these attempts are being resisted. The imperialist unipolar world is becoming a multipolar world through struggles of the working people across the world, including in imperialist capitals and by various states asserting their sovereignty and international order based on international law. SACP welcomes the call made by the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, President Xi Jinping, for a global civilization initiative. The initiative called for respect for the diversity of civilizations, upholding the common values of humanity in pursuing peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, and promoting robust international people-to-people exchanges and cooperation. To this extent, the SACP will soon hold a high-level bilateral engagement with the Communist Party of China. On the BRICS Summit, the SACP welcomes the coming BRICS Summit, which will be hosted by South Africa on 14 to 22nd August 2023. The BRICS countries, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have a combined 26.7% of the world's land surface, a total population of about 3.21 billion, which is 4.5% of the global population, and a combined GDP of US $26.6 trillion, which is 26.2% of the gross world product. The existence of BRICS challenges the US and European-dominated unipolar world system. The SACP looks forward to the presence of leaders such as Presidents Xi Jinping, Lula da Silva, and Vladimir Putin. And the SACP, together with other progressive organizations, will organize public events and programs in support of progressive ideas at the summit. We will build people-to-people relationships and show solidarity with the countries building a new inclusive world order based on cooperation, multilateralism, and respect for each other's sovereignty and independence. On the ICC arrest warrant for President Putin, we say, down with judicial imperialism. The SACP rejects the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court based in The Hague, Netherlands. The arrest warrant, based on frivolous charges, comes on the eve of an important proposal for peace in Ukraine by President Xi Jinping during his state visit to Russia and the BRICS summit due to be hosted in South Africa. The International Criminal Court was established to try individuals charged with the gravest crimes of concern in the international community: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. Unfortunately, imperialist powers continue to manipulate this multilateral institution and use it for judicial imperialism. Despite many calls and ample evidence, the ICC has consistently refused to charge the likes of Netanyahu of Israel, Bush, Clinton of America and Obama, Blair of Britain, who have destroyed countries and killed hundreds of thousands of people in Palestine, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yugoslavia, to name just but a few, and continued occupation of other countries' territories like in Syria, Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and of the Korean Peninsula. These ones, the ICC never say, here are charges for you. They walk freely. Netanyahu was even in Britain just last week. The SACP calls upon the South African government to ensure that President Putin attends the BRICS summit and that is afforded safe passage. Furthermore, the SACP calls upon the government to act with speed in withdrawing from the ICC and repealing the implementation of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court Act 27 of 2002. On Africa-Cuba Solidarity Conference, the SACP support the convening of an Africa-Cuba Solidarity Conference later this year, together with our allies. This is an important initiative to bring progressive forces from across the African continent together in united action in solidarity with the people of Cuba, a country that has given so much to the world and received less in return, a country that remains the torchbearer of the future of humanity as they resist imperialism and endure tremendous hardship due to a crippling and unjust economic blockade imposed by the USA for over 60 years. No country has been punished this much for so long by another country. I think followed by North Korea. These two countries have really received severe punishment by unilateral action in the main of the United States. And we say this must come to an end. On Western Sahara, the SACP notes new aggressive military action and hostilities from Morocco into Western Sahara. Further the building of a dividing apartheid wall of over 2,000 kilometers, even in the occupied territory of Western Sahara. We reaffirm our unflinching solidarity with the peoples of Western Sahara and Polisario Front, and further express our deep gratitude to the people and government of Algeria for the continued principled support of the Sahrawi people and their just struggle for national independence. Long live Algeria.
Long live.
We call on the AU and the United Nations to speed up the process towards the self-determination of the Sahrawi people. We further applaud the important political position of the South African government on their solidarity with the people of Western Sahara. Long live South Africa. On the situation in Swaziland, the SACP condemns the continued reign of terror against the people of Swaziland by a ruthless monarchy determined to resist a democratic transition at all costs. Of particular concern is the use of South African-based mercenaries to assassinate political opponents of the regime. We condemn the brutal assassination of Comrade Advocate Thulani Maseko, the chairperson of the Multi-Party Stakeholder Forum, negotiating the transitional conditions in Eswatini with SADC and the Eswatini government. We call for an independent investigation into his death and the circumstances leading to his death by SADC, the AU, and United Nations, not to leave this in the hands of the oppressive regime of Swaziland. The SACP calls upon South African government, SADC, and all progressive forces to show solidarity and provide appropriate support to the democratic forces in Swaziland and for a transition process. We wish the Communist Party of Swaziland a successful 5th National Congress, which they will be holding this coming weekend from the 6th to the 9th of April 2023. In the next few weeks and months, we will work towards repositioning our liberation movement to turn the corner and accelerate the transformation of the material living conditions of the people of our country. We need to immediately cushion the working class and South Africans against hyperinflationary impact associated with high food prices, higher energy costs, and thus increasing the cost of living for the working class and the poor. This is the end of the statement, and thank you very much.
No, thanks, GS. We will open for any question. Some of you had a chance to go through the statement before even the GS read it to you. If you raise your hand, you just introduce yourself and indicate the media house that you represent. Yes.
Okay. Oh, my name is Ndeba with the SABC. I've seen on the statement that you will contest elections. In fact, you will contest the 2024 elections within an effective and reconfigured alliance. The idea of a reconfigured alliance has been in the offing for some time. ANC and the SACP as well as Eswatini. Are you confident this time around that effective and reconfigured alliance will come to be? And secondly, in hindsight, would you say it was a big mistake that in 2017 the ANC went to its conference and took a resolution to withdraw from ICC, and 5 years later it went back to its conference again and rescinded on that resolution? Do you think that was a big mistake? And do you see it as maybe a government or a governing party that is all about appeasing the West as opposed to looking at the interests of its people and its neighbors? For instance, in this case, at some point the court wanted Omar Bashir to be indicted, and that caused a row itself.
It's Heidi Jacobs from ENCA. I just want to get further clarity on the issue around Putin. As an alliance, how do you propose or expect our government to handle when Putin arrives, given the warrant of arrest out?
Oh, I can't see at the back.
Sorry.
Okay.
My name is Mas Chava from Jacaranda. Just on the back of the question that Heidi asked, mine is you refer to the charges against Putin from the ICC as frivolous. Does that mean that you do not recognize that there has been transgression of human rights in Ukraine and that there have been lives that have been lost? And that's what the ICC says they charge them based on.
Yes, from SABC. As the alliance partner, can I just get your reaction with regards to the letter that was penned by former President Beki to his deputy President Omar Shafik?
GS.
What is the last point? What do you want us to comment on the letter? Okay. My dear comrades will also share some perspective. The first one is on the reconfiguration of the alliance table. The reconfiguration of the alliance at the moment is not something we will go back from. You can see that future collaboration and cooperation, particularly on the platform of contesting joint elections, will be based on the reconfiguration of the alliance. And we have said if this is not possible, we will go to the second modality of the Left Popular Front. In other words, we will then contest without the ANC. That's what it means. So we have reached the point of further discussions. What we are going to discuss are the proposals we have made to be the basis of what will constitute an reconfiguration of the alliance in practice. And we have outlined those conditions. For instance, the living conditions of our people is deteriorating, and yet the economic trajectory that we are pursuing is not meant to resolve those problems. But it's a neoliberal capitalist trajectory which cannot at all respond to this condition faced by our people. And therefore, an approach on an economic policy is firmly on the table for what will constitute joint action and therefore a joint alliance reconfiguration. We agree it has taken too long for these discussions to take place. But we are also confident that the ANC itself, including our allies in SACP, are having discussions on these matters. But the reconfiguration of the alliance is not only a requirement of the SACP. The entire alliance is talking about this question. Even the ANC NWC last week was discussing this matter. The President spoke about this question at the ANC National Conference. So it's an important matter that will also impose a new requirement for the renewal of the movement as a whole. Secondly is that the withdrawal from ICC, before we make accusations whether the ANC conference, the two previous conferences, one withdrew, one reinstated the policy, whether this was appeasing international capital, the facts stand for themselves. Since the ICC was established, in fact 2 weeks ago, a good article was in one of the newspapers, I think the City Press, by one of our professors, one of our doctors at the University of Johannesburg, who had written a beautiful article demonstrating empirical evidence that since the ICC was established, it has indicted 52 individuals. Of these 52 individuals, 48 are African leaders. 4 are former Russian leaders. Which African country has launched war against another, against Europe or others in the main? That will require so many African leaders to be indicted by the ICC. And 4 former Russians, that's basically those who were part of the former Soviet Union, who were charged. European imperialists, those that have colonized countries, those that have launched wars, continue to launch wars against other people all over the world. The apartheid Israel regime that continues to attack Palestine unceasingly. It's never indicted. The US government that launches wars and attacks to different countries, even their attacks on other countries are never mentioned. They are never indicted. The atrocities of the people they've killed in these many countries that we have just mentioned, few of them, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Palestine, Yugoslavia, and other places, continues. They are never indicted. There's evidence, scientific evidence. So, President Gbagbo of the Ivory Coast is refused from taking office after winning elections. A crony or imperialist crony from France, Ouattara, is put in office. Gbagbo is arrested together with his wife or partner. They are humiliated, denigrated, and taken to The Hague. Tried, later on acquitted, while they've been sitting in jail. When they are released, he's still awaiting his statement to participate in the political affairs of his country, despite that he's acquitted by this institution. So the institution, the ICC, has proven itself, it is incapable to be a multilateral institution. It is an instrument of imperialist forces. if you look into all of these things, there's enough evidence that this should not be a credible institution. And I think that if you look into many countries that have joined this institution, they would have done so largely based on its intentions. And also as part of the former colonized countries, we had thought that here is one institution that is going to make the world powers to account. Only to find that no, it's an institution of the same powers. Instead of them accounting, they are using it to further their interest in other countries and to attack people that they do not agree with. So that one I don't think is about per se appeasing the international system. The reality is that the ICC demonstrated itself incapable of being a body that can represent the oppressed. Yes, how do we propose that the government handles President Putin's arrival? I'm amazed that both of you who have mentioned President Putin just say Putin. It's President Vladimir Putin. We can give him respect. Look, our proposal is that yes, the government, firstly, the national executive, that is cabinet, and of course they have all the possibilities and the political wisdom and the executive authority given to them by the constitution. They should immediately withdraw from the ICC. And equally, if they withdraw, explore other mechanisms to create the safe passage for President Putin to come and participate in the BRICS summit. We must not allow the imperialist forces to create our country as a new ground for their wars. They want to use this platform in our country to continue their fight. But the biggest issue is that they are afraid of BRICS and what BRICS is becoming. We have just given you statistics. Look at how many countries have applied to join BRICS. And that many other countries, as they join BRICS, they are now beginning to deal with an instrument used by US and Western imperialism to oppress the world, the dollarization of world economy, where the world has imposed itself as the currency of exchange over others. Now BRICS countries have begun to say, we'll trade with each other through each other's currencies. If I'm a sovereign country, why shouldn't you respect my sovereignty? If you recognize me as a state, why can't we trade together in our own currencies? They are doing that, and many others are joining that. So with all of this thing, this is what is worrying the imperialist forces. That is why they want to disrupt a proper convening of the BRICS summit in this country. Not much about President Putin. They are fearing what BRICS is becoming, an alternative of this new multipolar emerging against the unipolar world imposition by the United States and its friends in Europe. Well, I under what we mean. We are basically saying, look, let's not elevate necessarily the ICC's role, because ICC, US has not ratified the ICC. Why can't they ratify it? Britain don't ratify it. All imperialist big powers want to ratify it because they want to walk free, and yet it's their instrument. It's Joe Biden who comments first, President Joe Biden who comments first on this matter about this warrant of President Putin. The White House comments on this thing. And they don't want to take responsibility for their own atrocities across the world. including in Latin America. Now, we are saying we want peace. And in this case, the attacks, they are daily attacks in the Russian territories, in Donetsk Republic, in Lugansk, and many other parts of Crimea and other parts of Russia that have been attacked on a daily basis, where civilians are dying by the imperialist forces, including those in South Africa here. They are stooges. Blocked completely Russian television, as an example, just to have a balanced view of this war. Why do you think, for instance, America has spent so much, billions of rands, Europe has been sending tanks, fighter jets and so forth to fight against Russia? What are they fighting about? Do you think that they're just throwing water? They're throwing bombs, even against civilians. They are dying on a daily basis in the Russian territory. All death is condemnable. We are condemning all deaths. And that's why we are saying we are calling for peace. But their intention, when President Xi Jinping of China was visiting President Putin to say, here is a peace plan to end the war, in order to undermine that, because this initiative for peace is not their initiative. They then say, ICC issued the warrant to arrest President Putin. That's how frivolous it is. It's petty politicking by the Western powers. But the world is clever enough now not to buy into their nonsense. So we won't fall for that. It's as simple as that. This one on the letter from President Mbeki. We had a brief discussion on because it came on the day that we were starting our meeting. We had felt that we will organize our own session with President Mbeki. We were told by the ANC Secretary General that possibly today the ANC officials will be having a discussion with President Mbeki. We'll also seek our own engagement with President Mbeki. We also believe that President Mbeki has raised important issues in that, and that the issues that he has raised should not be dismissed. They must be addressed by the movement. There are a variety of issues that, for instance, we agree with some of the issues that he has raised. The issue that we also believe that in the manner that we resolve them, we should do so with the intention to strengthen the movement than to weaken it, so that it can have the capacity to respond to some of the issues that he has raised. This is the framework upon which we said we will engage with him, and thereafter engage also with the leadership of the ANC. We have not as yet communicated with him that our intention to engage with him, but we really feel that we should be able to engage with him, and that the issue that he has raised should not be simplistically dismissed. Is that sufficient? Okay, let me allow my team here to add on whatever that I may have missed out as important questions.
No, I will add. I was expecting the treasures. Seniority is very important. Okay. And guys, it's not the Minister of Labour speaking, it's the Deputy Chairperson of the Communist Party.
I'm impressed.
So, we want to emphasize that. You see, on the issue of the ICC, what the General Secretary is saying is that we are accusing the ICC of double standards and selective justice. That's our position. And when he mentions this, a number of countries, even your own research, where are the weapons of mass destruction which they were looking for in the Middle East? None, after they've destroyed that particular country, after thousands of people were killed. Why were they not held to account? If you look at Libya today, the government in crisis, emergence of rival governments, and even heightened factionalism in that particular country. It's the destruction and how many people have died. But worse, it's when the United States is not a member of the ICC but wants to subject other countries to the ICC. That's really double standards. I thought that I must just emphasize that part. And the last point from Jacaranda about the human rights in the Russia-Ukraine war. Let me be rhetoric. Were there no human rights abuses in the other countries which were destroyed by the United States? What do we expect in a situation of war? All we're hearing, it's only one side of Ukraine. We're not hearing from the international media of what is going on the other side. Whereas it's two countries at war. And in such a situation, there are victims on both sides. So we need to talk about that. So what we are arguing is to put a posture or a narrative of Ukraine being a victim. But if you go back to the history, it's about the expansion of NATO. If you go back into history, which has always been contested, and violation of certain agreements, which were put at some stage when the USSR was breaking down. Those have been violated. We see the NATO moving closer to it. So there are serious disputes. That's why we always support a position which says, as the SACP, there must be a discussion, a peaceful resolution to that. We can't start by blaming, because if you blame on all the sides, what are you trying to say? Let me just raise one issue. During the debate of the issue of Sudan, Bashir, I remember we raised one example. President Mandela pardoned 12 generals in this country who were central to the killing of the South African people who were leading the defense force. He pardoned them for a simple reason, in order to have peace. Now, if you want to arrest Putin, whom are you going to discuss peace with? It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Any more addition?
Okay, sorry, no problem.
Entry?
Okay, maybe just an emphasis on one point. Okay, I'll come with that. Just an emphasis on particularly the issue of BRICS. As a summit we are looking forward to have in the country. I'm sure it's going to be very important for us to focus largely also of the impact that the BRICS will do for our country, because we do need this. It will do a huge impact on the economic part of our country as well. So the issue of bringing the President Putin's matter, it's a disruption. We should be worried about that more, because we really need the BRICS summit to be hosted here, and we're looking forward, based on the situation that we're currently carrying. It's true, we really have to, once we analyze this matter and discuss it, we do need to look seriously, as the GS has said, on the ICC's incapable, their incapability to be a balanced instrument. And therefore, the issue now, it's brought to the country, and we should look at it as bringing instability and just bringing chaos into our country. It can't be all the time in the country when there are issues in the ICC, and then we are targeted that we should be the one who arrests the presidents, and it's unfair. We know that we have a previous experience. It can't come again, and we really have to appeal and mobilize everyone else to appeal to this unbalanced instrument of the ICC to help us as a country to really don't get there again. It happened some other time. We don't want to deal with that. We want to deal with a serious situation that is confronting us and our people on the ground of the ungrowing economy, and we do want stability in the side of the economy, and we hope that it gets close and gets focused in a way that we are all assisted, including all the issues that we are raising with our alliance partner in terms of handling this. But surely we can't be used as a country, and we can't accept that from time to time we should be used, by the ICC for their own destabilization of our economy, and it's just not acceptable. Thank you.
Any further questions? One of the things that the CC has also asked you colleagues in the media to help us is balanced reporting on this matter. Since this war started, I have never seen any of you, inviting the Russian embassy to any of his doing, whilst the ambassador of Ukraine has been invited on several occasions. Now it's an area that at times we become worried about how
yes, because we've reached out to them and they're not willing to engage.
They are not willing to engage.
We've tried.
Okay.
Yes.
We will check with them.
You can go and do that, no problem.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, it looks like we are done. We are also launching our Krizani month program today with a picket that is taking place here at Constitutional Hill. Our Gauteng comrades are picketing there with one of the demands being that of the inquest that led to the assassination of our late General Secretary. And next week, Monday, is the Easter Monday, is the 30th anniversary commemoration that will take place at the Thomas Nkobi Memorial Park, also known as South Park Cemetery, from 10 o'clock in the morning. Where the General Secretary, the family, and other alliance leaders will be talking to the nation about the life and times of our late General Secretary, Comrade Krizani. Thank you.
Before that,
okay.
this is out of the SACP. It's in my other head. The INODG. The INODG is in the country, having a series of meetings with all network stakeholders or social partners. We'll have a full press conference on Wednesday in Pretoria, but we'll be able to give those details. Thank you.
No, thank you, colleagues. We hope to talk to you sooner. And if there are any further questions, then contact us to clarify.